Welcome to the Uncommon Podcast, where we discuss real estate, entrepreneurship, leadership, and faith. Today, my co-host Sam Tewes and I will talk through how we strive to incorporate Christ in our day-to-day lives. We'll be talking about how work is good, how we're called to be excellent at work, and the relationship between work and rest. Let's get into it. I know today we really want to dig into the Christian's worldview of work. Obviously, with our Uncommon Podcast, like we talk about real estate, entrepreneurship, leadership, but faith is a huge part of our journey. And that's something that really bonded us together when we met the first time. We got into it and started talking and just like, man, like this guy. Like,
it's the bedrock.
Yeah.
We talk about stuff needing to be built on something. That is the bedrock of everything that we discuss.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it needs to be discussed.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm excited to make this a topic of conversation that we come back to a lot. But I really think trying to get at the Christian's worldview of work, because from a secular standpoint, I think work oftentimes is villainized. And so I think it's helpful for us to kind of document some of our thoughts on that and how we view work as believers, but also people who are striving to build a business and be, successful in that regards too. So I'm super psyched to be able to get into this. Before we get too deep though, I maybe just like a little bit of background on our own individual spiritual journeys.
Yeah.
And so speaking for myself, I grew up in a Christian household. My dad has worked in a nonprofit. Youth for Christ was the organization. And so I was just super blessed to grow up with two parents who were honestly incredible and grew up in the church. And I think in a lot of ways avoided like a lot of hurt and a lot of suffering because of the way my parents raised us. And we're just incredibly grateful for that. Going into high school and now through college and professional career, like really started to develop a relationship with Christ on my own and realizing like just because your parents believe something doesn't mean that automatically like you believe it. Like there's no pathway to heaven where it's like, hey, what did your parents believe? It's just like, no, what do you believe? Like how to get into that. And so I've been blessed to be married to an incredible woman that pushes me to develop and grow my relationship with Christ every day and have people like you and men in my life that have encouraged me to continue to develop and grow. And so my walk with Christ continues to evolve and continues to grow. And some days, honestly, it's not where I want it to be. And some days I feel like really strong with that. So I'm hopeful that like as we continue to surround ourselves with like-minded men, like-minded women, that we continue to find ourselves walking with Jesus daily, but recognizing like perfection is not always attainable too. So excited to be able to get into this and talk through it. But that's a little bit of my Christian background and some of my worldview I'm bringing to this conversation. And so, yeah, you go.
Yeah. Very similar track record there. I grew up where both parents prioritized being in church on Sunday mornings, having, prayer time at the house. I grew up with four brothers for the first 17 years of my life, and then we were blessed to be able to adopt Christina, my youngest sister. That added another element of, prioritizing faith and making sure that it was something that was lived daily as an example through that whole experience. But similar, got to a point where in college, played baseball in college, and you play weekend series, and there was about a 3-year stretch where 5 months out of the year, I just didn't go to church at all. And so it was like, there was an absence, there was a void there that you feel, and it affects, you're absolutely called to attend church and be a part of corporate worship.
Yeah.
But, there are countries where you can't go to church every Sunday and things like that, where, there's still dedicated steps throughout daily life that you can take to, be closer with Christ. So I'm not giving myself the excuse that not going to church every Sunday was the reason I was, participating in things that not necessarily were Christ-like, but it was certainly a large contributor.
Yeah.
You need to surround yourself with that. So as that progressed, got into professional baseball and ended up being a part of just an incredible group of human beings, guys that were all more successful than me in baseball. And guys that every single one of them I looked up to in both a professional capacity and in a faith capacity. We dove into doing a scripture, journey, 365-day scripture journey where there was a text sent out every day, you know, somebody who's got the breakdown for the next day, and that individual was held accountable to, you know, provide substance to what the scripture reading was. And that really took something that was kind of lukewarm in my life to making it very much a priority, diving into that. And then I have the most incredible blessing of family, my relationship with my brothers and my dad, and my mom and my sister. I'm extremely blessed. We're close knit to a fault, maybe. So having them to go back and, you know, brush some of these new things that I felt like I had discovered in my faith life. And that was just an incredible resource to have. Fast forward, also married to an incredible woman that allows me to lead our household and really provides a soft-spoken demand of we're going to live high integrity lives, you know, with faith first. And pushes me in that way that I'm extremely grateful for. I'm extremely grateful for that and her demeanor surrounding that. So I guess, yes, to wrap around it, I feel like I've just lived an incredibly blessed life of resources that God's been like, here, you know, I'm going to throw these in your life and I want to see what you do with them type of a situation. And it's been nothing short of miraculous.
That's incredible. And I know one of our passions is we kind of contemplated, like, you know, doing a podcast, jumping into this, like trying to like document our journey a bit more, which is a journey, right? Like there's no really end destination in this, both professionally and spiritually. Like we're always evolving and growing. But one of the things we talk about uncommon and being uncommon is this idea that we want to set an example to the world of what it is to be excellent at what we do in our professional careers. But we want to also set an example that you can do it being strong Christian men.
Correct.
And honestly, sometimes I don't feel like a strong Christian man. Like there are times where I have doubt and I struggle with a lot of different things. But trying every day to surround yourself with people who can continue to remind you what truth is, and having that mindset where it's like, okay, yeah, we want to be uncommon. We want to be uncommon in what it is that we are building, what we're doing professionally, but we want to be uncommon from the world in the sense that you don't have to look very hard for secular ways to entertain yourself in the professional world.
Yeah.
It's not difficult.
Yep.
But to do what we're doing in a way that is honoring to God, that's an uncommon way to live life.
Absolutely.
And I think you and I both would agree that at the end of the day, we would rather experience less material success and create more long-term spiritual benefit to the people around us and set an example of what Christ is like on this earth to other people. And we would give up the material side of all of that to be able to have other people experience that in us.
Correct. Yep. I can 100% stand behind that. I think there's layers of complexity that go into every single thing that you just said. I mean, there's financial responsibility within the Christian. There's, you know, day to day, how you actually live. What are you actually portraying? Are you actually walking in a Christ-like fashion that people can look at you and say, okay, I see it. And there's something different there. Or is it something that you simply, you know, I sit here and talk about on a microphone, but as soon as I put it down, I'm going to go not do anything that I just talked about.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny because there's, unfortunately, we play the comparison game a lot as human beings. And so you sit here and, you know, you idolize a certain individual and how they live their life. And you give yourself a comparison of, man, I'm not there. I'm not there. They're living in X fashion. And I know something we've talked about is just raw authenticity and professing struggles and really diving into what that looks like. You know, for the last 3-4 weeks, you and I have sent each other book text messages after attending church on Sunday and just being like, man, this really hit me. This just smoked me. And then I find myself on Wednesday, you know, cursing because something went wrong at, you know, at work. Yeah. And then you think back to, man, how could I be so high
right,
and then so low where I'm, you know, wishing something bad would happen to another individual that did me wrong, or
Yeah.
something like that, where you can just
Yeah.
experience these such intense ebbs and flows
Mm.
specifically with what we're talking about, trying to build business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's extremely challenging. And so really stripping back, peeling back the curtain and getting into the guts of, man, how do we do this appropriately? And how do we do it with intent and hold each other accountable, more or less. Here in this conversation, I mean, we're trying to take, people watching this on a journey of what it looks like for us, and hopefully expose some truth to those individuals as well, and create a space of, comfort and they're not alone, and there's other people that are really, really struggling with how to navigate doing this the right way.
Yeah. And we don't, I mean, people say like, we don't have all the answers. Like we have very few answers.
Very few answers.
Like we don't know. Like,
yes.
So part of this is like documenting. And one of the things we talked about actually this Sunday, we were texting back and forth and just kind of running the parallel analogy to a marriage. And if, somebody was to get up and to do a ceremony at a wedding and would lay out this relationship of the marriage, and be like, all right, do you commit to your spouse to be faithful on Sundays? Like the other days don't really matter, but Sunday, do you commit to be faithful? And let's take it to another level. Do you commit to be faithful on Sundays and 30 minutes every morning? It's like everybody be in the crowd being like, what's going on? Like this is wild. Like you're not committed to that person. Like you've just picked a couple days out of the week where you're exhibiting some like discipline, in this case, like spiritual discipline, and then the rest of your life you do whatever you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was convicted by that, and I think you and I both are like, we want to live a life that is in alignment with Jesus Christ 24/7. Like that's what we are striving to do.
Yep.
Speaking for myself, I do not do that.
No,
like
I don't either.
No.
You can speak for me too. I mean,
okay.
I don't.
Well, you probably do it better than I do. Like I want to always keep that mindset and have that relationship where like Christ is in every part of my life. And I think today specifically, we want to talk about how Christ and how the Bible talks about work. It's a huge part of our lives. We spend probably more time than we should working and building this business, and we're incredibly passionate about it. And I think having a dialogue and a conversation and trying to like continue to discover and in some regards like verbally process what it is to do work with a Christian worldview is super helpful for me, and hopefully other people find this helpful as well. And I look forward to kind of revisiting this every now and then and being able to circle back and be like, oh, remember when we thought that, like, oh yeah, okay. But maybe we shouldn't be podcasting, like, but just being authentic and kind of saying this is where we're at right now.
Yeah.
So as we kind of get into the talking points here, I think we kind of laid out somewhat of a wireframe to keep us on track. And the idea was to talk about, from a Christian worldview, how work is good, be excellent at work, and then the relationship between work and rest. So jumping into that, I want to start with the relationship and God's view of work, this idea that work is good.
Mm-hmm.
I know one of the things, there's an author, John Mark Comer, that wrote a book called Garden City. And it was really the first time where I think it was, I kind of always felt this tension of, I feel called to work. Like I don't feel a sense of like guilt or like it's a non-Christian thing to go out and work.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes I feel like work is kind of villainized, and we are only going to work just so we can then like be done and go serve the kingdom, or we're going to go, we're going to work and then just to go spend time with our family. And like work is kind of this thing in the way of our spiritual life.
It becomes a means and a stopgap.
Yeah.
I have to do this so that I can accomplish this later in life.
100%. And I've never felt that. I've always felt like I'm actually my most aligned with Christ in my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why, what is this like contradiction? And so, and this, may sound simple to people, but if you read the account in Genesis, work was in the garden before sin ever entered the world. Like God created this paradise, and he created man and he created women, and he put us in the garden to work it and to create like when you read the creation account, it is God working. It is him creating this world that we live in.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it from that perspective, you're like, oh, wait, no, work is not a result of sin. Sin was in the world before sin ever entered into the world. And so that paradigm shift was huge for me. Right? All of a sudden it's like, okay, wait, work is good. God created us to work. And, I've got some scripture down here where Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it.
Period.
Like, oh, okay, so work's not bad. Like, it's okay, So I'm curious, like, with that, what is your relationship with like your Christian worldview and work been? Like, how has that evolved for you over, the last your professional career, playing professional baseball, which is work, and then translating it into what you're doing now with all your real estate? Like, how has that relationship grown and evolved?
Many different ways.
Yeah.
Specific, I think touching on the baseball part of the journey is kind of crucial in terms of how I view this, but I could not, in any discussion I've had, I still struggle with it. How is me throwing a baseball really hard and trying to strike another individual out serving Christ in any capacity? Because that's what I'm doing. Like, I'm doing that 95 times in a game, and that's my job.
Yeah.
I try and throw the baseball hard and make you miss it.
Yeah.
How am I serving Christ doing this?
Yeah.
And so while it is work, yes, there are a lot of, tangent aspects to that stem through that position. My place in the locker room was where I viewed that being the most intense in terms of my actual laborious activity for the kingdom. I've got a chance for 10 hours a day with the same 25 guys to show how I'm living daily.
Yeah.
And what is my bedrock and what anchors me to, I was extremely blessed having a handful of guys in that locker room that were, in arms with me, trying to live that exact same way. But as anything in a secular worldview, with a lot of, baseball being a stem of, hey, I'm doing this so I can go make millions.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to I want to be the dude. I want to be on Sports Illustrated magazine. I want to be all this stuff. It's extremely hard to dial that back. And while I think I'm going to be scatterbrained throughout this whole process because it's so deep, but while I think it is something that it was hard to identify and hard to give yourself a position of, man, I'm a baseball player for Christ.
Yeah.
I still have a hard time with that, like, identity. Even I think some people do it really well.
Yeah.
But your job as a Christian in a workspace is to, I think, create tangential effects through people. If you're not in a position of direct, like, hey, I'm a minister, or I am a missionary, or I am, running a focus on the family, or I'm running a nonprofit with this primary focus. If your daily activity is not centered around a Christ-like service to another individual, then I think that your kingdom outreach is through tangential events. I have a brother that's an orthodontist, and he had a conversation in the office the other day that I thought it was hilarious. I can't remember exactly the context of it, but he said, my employee came up to me and just hammered me with this deep theological question. And I was taken aback. And then we had that Bible study the next morning. He was like, it was just incredible. Like, God can work through vocation in that way.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's not necessarily, he didn't have that effect through, cleaning somebody's teeth or realigning their teeth. Yeah. But it was a tangential effect of what we actually do.
Yeah.
So, very roundabout answer to my journey with it. I take that view into what I'm doing now with real estate. Me trying to get a really good deal on a piece of real estate and own it to either help myself and my personal financial picture or a bunch of investors.
Yeah.
I'm serving investors, but again, through that direct action, that's not like a kingdom building piece.
Yeah.
And so it comes through the tangential, effects of, how am I living my life? How am I communicating with these individuals? What am I displaying day to day to steward this gift that Christ has given me?
Yeah.
in the most high level that I possibly can.
Right.
How can I be productive with it?
Yeah.
And I miserably fail at it every single day. And so it drives me nuts because I am an addict of progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I did not have a Christian anchor, I think I would be wildly successful in a secular worldview because I love progress.
Yeah.
Like it is an addiction of mine. Like I love to go. And it has to be anchored in, no, Sam, you can't do those things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's not a holdback. I don't think Christ withholds you from success, but it is something that gives you a bedrock and kind of a staple of, hey, live within these confines. And I think defining those day after day is difficult. And again, a reason that we're having this discussion.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that actually segues really well into our next point, which is be excellent at work. Like you talk about, like you made it to a level of professional sports that most people can only dream of. I got to about fourth grade and decided like I'm not going to make it. Like it's a very high level and takes a level of excellence and talent to be able to be at that level. And to think about, in the Great Commission, we're called to go into all the world. There are certain rooms that you will never get into. I don't care how much you love Jesus, like you're not getting in unless you are excellent at what you do.
Yeah.
And because you, in this instance, were excellent at throwing a ball really, really hard, you got into a room to be able to influence people's lives that I would never be able to get into, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I think if we acknowledge the fact that work is good and then follow that up, be excellent at work, like what does Scripture say about that? So we wrote down a couple passages here. It's Proverbs 22:29. It says, "Do you see a man skillful at his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men." It's like, that's incredible. Like if you are great at what you do, you will be put in positions and be in front of people who can, in some instances, have so much more influence over, well, in this case, a king, like over nations of people, because you are excellent at what you do. Mm-hmm. So I read passages like that. I'm like, man, like if we in our world now, in our business, have the ability to be excellent and we become great at this thing, what type of kingdom impact can we have through the people that we get to interact with?
Yeah.
Like that's pretty powerful. And then Titus 2:7, it says, "Show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity." Like that goes to, like I said, you bring that, like I'm only worried about like success. I'm only worried about money. It's like, where's the integrity and the dignity in that? Like that's part of excellence. Mm-hmm. Is bringing the level of like, when Sam says he's going to do something, like Sam's going to do it. And it just increases the level of like trust and accountability to be able to grow that. So I'm curious, and maybe tapping back into like some of your professional baseball experience, like, do you feel that? Did you ever think about that? The fact that like you are in this room because you are excellent at this thing.
No, I can honestly say I never thought about that in the moment.
Yeah.
I think getting peeled back out into the quote real world, it exposes a lot more layers of this conversation than when you're, in a highly structured environment. I say this kind of facetiously, but it's true. Baseball, more or less, is like, this is a horrible comparison because it's not a service, but like the military or like prison. Like your day is so structured. You wake up at 6, you're at the field at 9, you work out for 2 hours, you eat lunch, you have pregame, you play a game, you go home and you sleep, and you do it again. Yeah. And then maybe throw a bus trip in there every now and again. But you get so numb to the habitual action that goes in day to day. And so that was expanding upon your question for no reason. But I would say, I mean, I didn't take that for what it was until I got outside of baseball and I started interacting with people even like yourself. I mean, you get into those rooms and you start discussing people who you aspire to be, And then it's, I've had a conversation with this individual. I've had a conversation with this individual, and you are exposed to high level individuals that being excellent at your craft gets you in front of more people and gives you an opportunity to stand on, your soapbox and tell people about Jesus.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very, very true.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I know you didn't think about it when you were in there, but like reflecting back on that, like it's pretty powerful. And like who even knows like who all that's going to benefit over time.
I agree. And that's like that's a sovereign placement of Sam that Sam had no clue what was happening in the moment. But then you can look back on it and be like, man, I'm glad you're pulling all the levers and I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, because I would have screwed this up way worse. So I do think understanding that, God's will, God's placement of you in certain circumstances and situations in life to serve is very incredible to look back on. And if you're able to identify those situations in the moment, it's sometimes it can be more fruitful if you can identify it in that moment.
Yeah. And I think, going back to like Matthew 28:16-20, right? In the Great Commission, where it does say, go into all the world and make disciples. Growing up, I always thought that through the lens of like missions.
Mm-hmm.
And I have 3 younger brothers, and one of my younger brothers actually is a missionary, and like it is over in Africa, like that's gone into a different part of the world. And I think it becomes easy for somebody like me who is in the professional world and has had some success and is like, oh, those people will go into all the world and I can help finance that, right? Like that's my role in this situation. But I think when you think about it through what you just said there, it's go into all the world. Like last I checked, we're sitting in Omaha, Nebraska. Like this is the world. Like we're here, like we're in it. And it doesn't always mean you've got to go to Africa like my brother did, which is incredible. But sometimes like our missions field is just right around us every day.
Yeah.
And what you said is simple, but is really true, is like you just need to be, I think, aware of it and like reminding yourself of that. And when you remind yourself, like, my missions field is my professional placement. Like you and I are developing and building a business and, building this real estate and all these things. And it's putting us in rooms that is our mission field.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we doing to draw those people closer to Christ? And if you don't think about it through that perspective and you're not in relationships with people who are encouraging you to have that perspective, I think it very easily you can lose a lot of opportunities.
I agree. And something that you and I talk about a lot that I think is, it definitely has strong opinions throughout the Christian community is we both rub shoulders with people that we would say don't align with our belief systems, but that's not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
That's not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
It's, as you just said, sometimes your missions field is right in front of your face. If I have a handful of individuals in my life that aren't completely aligned with what I say, that's not a harmful thing. It gives me a chance to be a light in that place.
Yeah.
And express how to conduct business in a way that I believe to be the right way and the correct way to do it, and the way that Christ calls us to do it.
Yeah.
And so rubbing shoulders with people that don't necessarily, have the same kind of alignment that you and I have isn't a horrible, horrible situation to be in.
Mm-hmm.
It can, in fact, be an opportunity to be somebody that's evangelizing or be somebody that is missions oriented in that specific circumstance.
And this is just a verbal journey for us here. So I have no answer. I'm just curious your thought on this. Like, what is your perspective and take on being in business and like having business partners with non-believers?
A personal stance, like how I've conducted.
Yeah. Like, what's your take on that?
It is not something that I have been completely, it's not a prerequisite.
Okay.
I should say.
Yeah.
It's not are you a Christian? No. Okay. We can't be business partners.
Yeah.
That hasn't existed.
Yep.
I would say, are you an ethical person?
Mm,
No. Okay. We can't be business partners.
sure.
There's that.
Yeah.
But I think the Spirit works in many, many ways. And if there's a person that has a desire to be in partnership with me that doesn't necessarily have the belief system that I do, if I'm sitting there and I say, nope, can't be business partners with you because, we're not aligned on this front.
Yeah.
Granted, I do not have the power to shut down the Spirit. The Spirit's going to work in ways that I can't, understand and
Yeah.
over and above me.
Yeah.
But in that situation, Spirit could very well be using me to expose the gospel to that individual.
Yeah.
Why not take advantage of that, especially if they're really good at their craft?
Right.
And they are good for business and they are good for
Yeah.
XYZ
Yeah.
and everything that reflects within, commerce as a whole.
Yeah.
If that person is a highly successful, highly talented individual that behaves ethically and gives me an opportunity to daily expose Christ.
Yeah.
No, I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that is a good distinction and I'll give you my opinion on that answer, but like, if you do fall under the perspective, like, no, you can be in business with non-believers, there still has to be like an ethical alignment, like a wisdom to like,
Correct. Yeah.
this person will engage in business in a way in which conduct like is right and ethical.
Yeah.
Because like in our world, like there are people you could align yourself with where you're just like, ooh, that's sketchy, you know, like I don't, so and I've been a part of businesses of like both, right, where it's been a lot of Christians, a lot of believers, as kind of like the core team, and then like very secular as well. And I really feel like there's a middle ground there where when you have all believers in an organization, I really don't feel like you're having that go into all the world. Like we work so much of our lives and it creates such a great opportunity to be able to engage with non-believers and show them that you can be excellent. Like I said, the whole uncommon vision, right? Like we can be excellent at our craft and we can love Jesus and set that example to them. And if you're intentionally only surrounding yourself with believers in that, like, I guess you can all encourage each other, but you're not like having that broader impact. Mm-hmm. But if you are also the only light in a dark room, I mean, just kind of the adage of like, it's easier to pull people down than it is to pull people up.
Yeah.
Like, you look at the example of Jesus and he had 12 disciples, but he had 3 dudes, right? Like Peter, James, and John, like those were his dudes.
Yeah.
And I think there's like an interesting kind of parallel to that, where it's like, you need to have that core group that are willing to sit down in a room with headphones and a microphone and be like, I don't know really what I'm talking about, but like, let's talk about it, because I want to go on this journey and I want to be open and honest that like, we don't have all the answers, but like, let's try to figure it out together and grow in our relationship with Christ openly. And for me, like if I've got like 1 or 2 guys, like you and I's relationship, and we can like lock arms, it creates such a powerful effect for me to be able to go into a secular world and be like, all right, I'm not crazy. Like I believe what I believe.
Yeah.
Like this guy believes it too. Like we're together on this.
Yeah.
And then be able to go out. So like, I think that there's like a nice like balance there. And when you are aligned on your faith and on your beliefs, it's amazing like the power that can have when the 2 or the 3 of you can like lock arms and like walk forward with that together.
Yeah. I agree with that take. And I support that. And it's a reason that for those of you that don't know, I met Alex 7 months ago, and we met and we just sat down and talked for like 2.5 hours. And then I texted him like 5 hours later and I was like, you might not know this, but we're going to like partner. And it's because it was one of those situations where it was somebody that was zealous to succeed, but even more zealous to be a man of Christ and lead his household and lock arms with like-minded people. And so that, to your point, when you find an opportunity to link arms with people like that, I think it's just a non-negotiable. You have to link arms with those people.
Yeah. I love that. And I think you and I both share in the opinion that neither of us have it figured out.
No,
Like,
so far from figured out.
it's like as far as you could be, but it was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know. There's so much I don't know. And I am convicted by that. Like part of that's like, I need to take more ownership of that process.
Mm-hmm.
But just the camaraderie you find in finding somebody else that's willing to try to be like on the journey to figure it out. Like how many people do we interact with that just don't care?
Yeah.
They don't think about it. It's not in their psyche at all. Like for you and I, like we dialogue about it. We talk through it. Like we're growing together with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where, just again, like locking arms and knowing you have somebody else who's approaching this the same way. Doesn't have all the answers, but is like dedicated to try to figure out this together, man. Like let's work on this together.
Yeah.
So I want to transition to the third point, which, dude, this is like, I will speak for both of us here. This is not a strength of either of ours. And I'm convicted by this a lot because the Bible talks about this all the time, but it's the relationship between work and rest. There is, I feel like in our society, I don't even say feel like this has been my experience, is if you communicate and if you like express even that you take a Sabbath, it's like, oh, that guy's gonna get left behind. Like we got to grind 7 days a week, 24/7, like grind. You can't let anybody ever know like you're taking a break. Before we jump into this, like give me like your take on that from both being a professional athlete, where it's, I assume, very cutthroat, and then bringing into the professional world as well. Like what has your view on rest been through your professional career?
I'm the poster child for my desire is to not align with rest in everything in me. Like my pursuit is to be the guy that somebody looks at and they say, man, that guy's a grinder. Like that dude works harder than anybody else.
Yeah.
That's that's been, both in sport and just like in education formally, being the guy that was going to work harder than everybody else served well. And it does serve well. I mean, being a quote unquote grinder it's a good thing, but asterisk big, but we are called to rest and we are called to worship and take time to be extremely dedicated and intentional to time with God, where that is an exclusive focus. And I mean, I can't, it's like I have guilt holding a microphone right now, speaking on it because I'm so bad at it.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't have productive thoughts on it other than I have such a heavy amount of conviction on it.
Yeah.
And I work on it, but I'm still so awful at it. But I do recognize the importance of it. And I really don't know what that looks like between high functioning individuals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't have a perfect answer for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just reinforcing this concept from a biblical perspective, going back to the creation account, like the God of the universe built and designed and created everything and did not need to. I believe it was literally out of example to us, took the seventh day and rested. Yet we, in our little human worlds, are like, no, I'm going to go 7 days a week. Like, I'm going to go 24/7. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And the God of the universe is looking at us and just being like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And I think sometimes, like, I get a little bit chapped on this, where it's like, you feel like people get to the top of the mountain and look back down and be like, hey, you should slow down a little bit on the journey. Like, we're up here, it's really nice, but like you should go slower. And that makes me want to just like go like, no, we got to go harder and harder and harder to get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Right. When in reality, like the rhythm that God set in Scripture was like God created for 6 days. Like he built and designed and created, but then he took 1 day to just be present. I was on Just a little side note. I was on a trip with my wife a couple weeks ago, and it was, a nice beach vacation that we went on, and it was a really great experience. We got in Thursday, and Friday, had a great night's sleep, great meal, woke up, and from sun up to sundown, we had detached from technology. We were in a beautiful location. We just engaged and connected with my wife, and went to bed Friday night and woke up Saturday. And man, like the feeling of like, wow, that was so rejuvenating. That was so like, it was just grounding in so many different ways. And I'm kind of coming to this realization as I'm talking to you right now. That was a Sabbath. That was me just taking a day out of the week, like our Creator designed, and just resting and being intentional with my wife and enjoying her and not letting work and emails and texts and phone calls like get in the way. And it was so like, it was incredible. That is something like I don't exercise though. The fact that I can think of one instance where I like took a day and was fully present,
Yeah.
and like that stands out is it's pretty convicting.
Yeah.
And, like it's pretty convicting for me. I got a quote here that I wrote down, another one from John Mark Comer, which I really like this. He says, "The Creator God is inviting us to join him in this rhythm, this interplay of work and rest. And when we don't accept his invitation, we reap the consequences. Fatigue, burnout, anxiety, depression, busyness, starved relationships, worn down immune systems, low level of energy, anger, tension, confusion, emptiness. These are signs of a life without rest." As like I read through that, I'm like, yeah, check, check. Like so many different things.
Yep.
But this is why, like, I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate our relationship, because you and I are coming to this saying, like, we're not good at this. And we acknowledge the biblical text that says you should do it. And then we look anecdotally at our life and be like, at least from my perspective, be like, I probably should do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it is honestly out of, I don't know. Like, is it fear that we'll fall behind? Is it fear what we think of other people? Is it just because we love what we do? Like, why is that? Like, why is rest so difficult?
I think it's difficult specifically for people like us and people that are wired in a similar capacity, that have large goals, have things that they want to accomplish. There's no metric of progress and rest. It is pause and reflect and be in even a pursuit of a relationship. And maybe I'm disagreeing with myself as I talk through this, but you can spend time, you made the example of your wife. You progress in your relationship with your wife as you pause on the rest of things. So maybe I'm completely wrong about that, and I'm perfectly willing and able to accept that. Yeah. But it's so difficult to just turn the motor off. It's almost like you want to keep you got a fireplace and you want to keep the ignite light on all the time, so you don't have to go back in and relight it and then turn the gas on. You just want to make sure that it's still on. Yeah. So just in case you need to, turn the gas up, you're ready to go. Yeah. I can't, taking that back, I have the hardest time just intentionally turning that pilot light off. Yeah. I'm a superpower secularly in a lot of high functioning business people and you'll hear them talk about it, is just a superpower is being available. Intentionally being available at all. Like if you can respond to a text or an email 100%, like that, 100%. That's superpower.
It's like glorified in our world. Yeah.
I'm really good at that.
Yeah.
I need to intentionally take time to push pause on that.
Yeah.
Turn it off and not do that.
Yeah.
Now, I do think we both understand the importance of the Sabbath, but that means for your other 6, you should be grinding.
Yeah.
And we've discussed that. That's been the intent of the first 2 discussion points.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not called to have a 5-day Sabbath a week. Like, you're not called to work 8 to 12 and chill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And what that work is I'm not saying never retire. Like, yes, that's a good thing. People work hard to retire, but I think in retirement, people move into other life cycles of, and this would bridge into our next thing of calling and vocation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what you're really meant to do in this life. But I don't know. I always play devil's advocate on both sides of things. When people are like, man, I just think you need to grind. I love inserting, okay, but we need to remember the Sabbath. But when then people make, a soapbox stance on the Sabbath, it's like, okay, you're exactly right. But you also need to be working really hard during these other 6 days.
Right.
I mean, this is like, work is a priority.
Yeah.
So I think being very open and honest about those situations and not taking this massive dogmatic polarizing stance and being like, you're awful at this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, hey, you're doing a really good job for 6 days. Let's chill out.
Yeah.
7th, turn it off.
Yeah.
Like, this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And if you're having a 7th day where you got a Sabbath hangover for 3 days, like, hey, let's get it back in gear.
Yeah.
Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah, that's interesting. And as I'm kind of processing this, I'm thinking, we have a God and the creator of the universe, and we believe that he has a plan for our lives and that he wants what's best for us. And in scripture, he lays out a rhythm for life, right? 6, 1 off, 6, 1 off, 6, 1 off. But we don't live that way. Like, is that out of a lack of faith that he actually has what's best for us in mind when he said that rhythm?
I don't know. That's a really good point. I love R.C. Sproul. He was a Ligonier ministry guy. Had St. Andrew's Chapel down in Florida for a while, but he this is a parallel to what you're saying. If you were to start a new country today and you had 10 laws, like, you could only make 10 laws, what do you think those laws should be? And he was like, it's the 10 Commandments. That's like the perfect governing structure.
Yeah.
And like, we overcomplicate or give more, subliminal meaning to sometimes stuff that exists within scripture, but it's like, you're exactly right. God designed it this way.
Yeah.
This way is the way that we're supposed to do things. And so
to
answer your question, I don't know why we don't.
Yeah.
I mean, human nature is in direct opposition to how Christ is.
Yeah.
I mean, sinful nature hates holiness.
Yeah.
But I think direct intent and motive, and we always talk about intentionality behind action.
Right.
I mean,
right.
really sitting down and honing in on that is just crucial.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I like that. And I do think, and I hear what you're saying too, where I do think there's people that are like really big on rest that are pretty apathetic people. That's an issue I have. And I think why sometimes people like us go so far to the other side is from like a worldview standpoint. And this may be just my own experience, is that people oftentimes view Christians as pretty average.
Yeah.
Like professionally, in the professional world.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make the case that like part of it is because, we are living to a different standard. But honestly, like just being totally candid, I just think sometimes like we are just average. We don't strive to be excellent at our work. We don't have a good relationship with our work. And that just drives me crazy, man. Like, it drives me crazy to think that people's view of Christians in the professional workplace is just a bunch of average individuals just kind of coasting through life.
Yeah.
And so, what would it look like if we committed 6 days a week, like the biblical example, to like create, to build, to cultivate, to like be excellent at what we do. And then we took a day to just unplug, be present, be in our worlds with our families. Like,
yeah,
What would that rhythm look like? And if that's God's plan for our lives and that's the design for the rhythm for our lives, like, would that not produce the most optimal outcome to like ensure his plan for our life? Right? Like,
It's a great take and a great question.
yeah.
I can't answer it because I've never done it successfully a single day of my life. So
There you have it. Like, that's something like, and I said, I love the conversation because it's honest and it's a discovery process. And it's like, I know, and again, just for me, anecdotally, thinking back on that trip with my wife, like it was one day. And the way I felt after that one day was like so recharged. And I'm like, God literally wants us to experience that once a week. Like, I did that once. We've been married for almost 8 years, and I've done it one time on that one day, and it was great. And God's looking at me being like, hey man, like, you could do this every week, like, that's the design. So I don't know. I'm kind of challenged by that. But with that, I do want to kind of pivot. You brought up like vocation versus calling.
Yeah.
Like, talk through that.
I think it's an interesting conversation within the Christian circle as a whole, and really defining what your occupation is versus what your calling is. I mean, vocation and calling are two very different things. Again, referencing R.C. Sproul, he talks about a lot of times as Christians, we get the sense that our calling and our vocation is tied to us, living on a bed of nails and, like just the daily suffering of like Peter and the apostles and like what they had to go through. And like, again, the comparison game of like measuring sticks where it's, God has different designs for different people's lives. And I think identifying God's sovereignty throughout that whole thing is extremely crucial. So I didn't answer your question, but I kind of want to flip it back on you. And how do you define vocation versus calling and what you're doing? Because the way I view it is, I think I'm called to be in relationship with people. My calling and my thing that I do well that has a direct impact to the kingdom is to be in relationship with people. And I think God designed us to be in relationship with people, but I've identified, and other people have identified, Sam, you're good at being in relationship and kind of like diving into a relationship with people.
Yeah.
That's something that you should pursue.
Yeah.
I'm a bad teacher. I really am. Like, I'm a bad teacher. I'm a good shepherd.
Yeah.
I can listen and ask productive questions, but instructing and like, I can keep you, let's hang out in this, area. But if you want to like progress and you want to learn the Bible better and you want to, that's a place that I have conviction about because I don't have the level of knowledge that I want to. So I pursue it, but I still, even when I have an element of pursuit to it, I don't get a sense of, man, I'm like, I got a real gift for teaching this passage or, preaching on it. My oldest brother's an attorney, and I think he'd be an incredible minister just because of the way that he teaches. I don't have that gift, but I have the gift of sitting here talking to you and having productive conversation and getting deep into things and speculating and kind of pulling and twisting knobs and getting deep into conversation and giving a level of, hey man, I really care about you and I want this to be productive. So calling, I think that's a calling. You're called to do this in the kingdom. Work, use this skill professionally because you're really good at it to go do something incredible and be great at it. Right now for me, that's working in acquisitions in real estate and building that arm of a company in tandem with doing everything that you and I are doing together and building out the Uncommon situation. But the primary piece of that, I need to be good at Excel sheets and I need to be good at pulling levers in creative finance. Like, cool. Those are all very tertiary skill sets, but my calling and my pieces is this piece of relationship. And I use that well in my conversations with sellers and my conversations with people that we're raising capital with and my conversations with my team members by explaining deal structures and being able to kind of be a centerpiece to like talking with people. I think that is that's like a kind of a separator. They work together, but they're definitely separate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think looking at this vocation and calling, like if I exchange the word vocation for occupation, like is that a fair
That's fair.
exchange?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if there is a difference between them. If we go back to what we talked about, it's like our desire 24/7 is to walk alongside Christ in our lives. And he's given each of us unique giftings, talents, abilities. I think our best way to impact the kingdom, the Great Commission, is to actually make our occupation in alignment with those spiritual giftings, right? So like what you just laid out, all those things that you talked about are spiritual giftings, like your ability to communicate and to connect and to be like so engaging as one-on-one conversations and to go deep and to turn these knobs. Like it's a spiritual gifting that you have and you do it professionally. So again, I think it parallels even into being excellent as well. Like you didn't go out and try to do something that you didn't naturally have the ability to do.
Correct. Yeah.
Like you went out and did something that you were innately good at, which I think there's a connection there. Like look at that, be like, okay, I'm naturally good at this thing. Who created me? Who gave me these abilities? Well, God did. So potentially like my calling to serve the kingdom is within that gifting, right? And then let's translate that even and go even deeper to say, how do I make my profession be able to leverage that gifting and ability that God has given me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, and then it parallels into like the being the excellent, right? Like if you wanted to go out and like knowing you, like I know you, like if you wanted to be like a data analyst and be in Excel sheets all day, like you're smart enough that you could be good at it, but would you ever be great? Like, would you ever be excellent? Like maybe you could develop like the skill sets and the competencies, but you would never have the passion because you were never called to do that.
Yeah.
But instead, you're going out and you're working with like buyers and sellers and investors every day and engaging in these one-on-one conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And you work really, really hard. You work a ton of hours, but like you are so far ahead of everybody else. Like what you've done in such a short period of time professionally is because you are doing something that is within your calling, I think. And
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it.
yeah. And so I don't know if that answers the question or not. But I think
it kind of does. I think a lot of people fight that though. I mean, I think a lot of people look and they use woodworking as an example.
Yeah.
Let's say somebody grew up in the church and they're going and they're hearing, hey, the Great Commission, I need to go out into the world and I need to do this. But God gave them an incredible gift to sculpt wood and make incredible custom cabinets.
Yeah.
And provide an unbelievable product and do it in an extremely Christ-like fashion and, provide a product at a competitive price that's, fantastic. And they're serving the kingdom in that way.
Yeah.
But they hone this sense of guilt over it, that they're doing this thing that doesn't have direct contribution. Like in my laborious activity, it does not have a direct like calling element to it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
it's harder to say God called me to sculpt wood than it is to say God called me to preach.
100%.
Like that, people
100%.
have a hard time saying that.
I think that goes back to like our initial points though of like my perception of work more or less got in the way of advancing the kingdom.
Yeah.
When I think through this conversation, like I'm even more confident in one of the primary ways I can advance the kingdom is being excellent at my work. And once you accept that, I think it makes work even more fulfilling. And it even provides like more meaning and purpose for like, why are we getting up at, before the sun comes up and grinding and getting to these emails and getting on these things, doing all this. So like, I don't know. That's a really interesting perspective, but I think, the fundamental of that is really there shouldn't be a difference between it. Like our way to bring honor and glory to God is to be excellent at our work, which I think can be both a vocation / occupation and an exercising of your calling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man.
It's a good topic of conversation.
It's just a journey.
It is.
It's just a journey.
Just kind of keep going on it.
Sitting here. I mean, I don't I don't know if somebody knows the answer. We have 2 seats here. So somebody could come in and dialogue on this more. But
Yeah.
that's what I love about our relationship, though, is that we just sit down, and today we decided to record this conversation.
Yeah.
But this is just
It's happened in scooters 15 times.
our conversation.
Yeah.
This is what we talk about. And so I appreciate you taking the time to sit down. I look forward to getting these seats filled with some other people too, and being able to keep talking and engaging in this. Yeah, man, it was awesome.
A lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Have a good one.